second. You should be down to
You're not going to have it for many years. And I just want to come and say hi.
Oh, thank you.
I'm on detail first.
How are you?
You should. And I think you were on vacation.
I was for a while. Of course, it wasn't around it. I was with John Connell. It was a good team. Cool.
Yeah, well, I get to have a few minutes.
Yeah, my pleasure. Yeah. Hopefully we have a good year.
You should get it now. Yep. I'll kill this for the moment.
Good job. Say hi to Sean for us.
Subcommittee to order, and thank all of our witnesses for being here with us today. We're eager to hear your contribution to the subject of our concerns, which is visa overstays. Most of the time when we talk about the flaws of our immigration system, we talk about border security as being the paramount concern, and for me it is, obviously coming from Texas with the 1,200-mile common border, and notwithstanding the great work being done by the Border Patrol, it still remains a vulnerability, and we are working hard to come up with some proposals that will help address that. But the one vulnerability that seems to be overlooked is visa overstays, people who enter our country legally and then who overstay their visa and simply melt into the great American landscape. And as I think about it, while I understand the desire of people coming from other countries perhaps to immigrate to the United States because of economic or security conditions, it is almost more offensive to me that people come into our country legally and in spite of the courtesy and that we demonstrate to them by allowing them to come in temporarily, they exploit that and take advantage of it and violate our immigration laws. There are a number of reasons why people stay beyond the period of their visa. They may have family in the United States or seeking a better life and economic opportunity. Some are seeking refuge or asylum, and others may in fact seek to be just doing us harm. Whatever the reason, we have to take steps to stem the tide of visa overstays and restore some order out of chaos when it comes to this flaw in our immigration system. Border security, as I indicated, is more than just admitting people to the United States. It starts with identifying the right people before they leave their home country to come to the United States, knowing once they are here, and ensuring that they depart when their terms of their visa expires. I was pleased, continue to be pleased by the news of the apprehensions along the southern border. While we have this strange idea that the fewer people that are detained is actually a sign of success, we, I guess, have a common belief that that represents fewer people trying to make it across, and thus the only indicator we really have. But to me, it's some indication that deterrence actually works. When the message is sent that either people are going to be detained at the border when they come across, or otherwise by law enforcement if they commit crimes in our country, it's clear to me that the President's executive orders and the enforcement policies of the Department of Homeland Security and Justice are having an impact in deterrence alone. But we haven't seen the same drop in visa overstays. Most overstays have banked on the fact that no one would even be looking for them because of lax enforcement and no real network or system to comprehensively identify people who overstay their visa and invite them to return home after their period of their visa expires. So they could just stay until the United States and until they become eligible for some sort of benefit merely through the passage of time. The two DHS overstay reports for 2015 and 2016 reveal just how big the problem is. In 2016 alone, more than 700,000 aliens stayed in the United States past their authorized time, 700,000. And while that may seem like a relatively small number compared to the millions of foreign nationals who come to the United States every year, it's still a significant number. The magnitude of the problem cannot be overstated. Those who come to the United States on legal visas but are intent to do harm count on the fact that they can easily overstay their visas and blend into the fabric of American society. Let's not forget that one of the worst terrorist attacks on U.S. soil, 9/11, was carried out by 19 hijackers, 5 of whom were visa overstays. Prior administrations have not made visa overstay enforcement a priority or devote the necessary resources to get the job done. President Trump, Secretary Kelly, and Attorney General Sessions have made it clear, though, that visa overstay enforcement will be a priority, and for me that is welcome news. But it doesn't end there. Congress has a job to do as well. We need to eliminate some of the incentives for people to overstay. This includes making it clear in the law that if you deliberately overstay your visa, you won't be eligible for any immigration benefit in the future, ever. Finally, we need to have a complete biometric exit program in place. This is something we've been talking about the entire time I've been here in the Senate through the U.S. Visit program. No effective way to date of determining when people exit, especially if they leave at land ports, through land ports of entry. But I'm hoping that technology will provide us additional tools to do that. But we need an effective biometric exit program in place, no matter how people come and go, whether by air, sea, or land ports of entry. So I hope to hear today about the progress ICE and CBP have made in streamlining access to systems that better track visa overstays. With that, let me turn to the ranking member, Senator Durbin, for any opening comments.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman, for holding this hearing. Experts estimate that more than 40% of the more than 11 million undocumented immigrants in our country overstayed their visas. They came to the United States for a variety of reasons, with visas to visit, to go to school, to work, with the understanding they would stay for a time certain, and they overstayed. One of those I met, whose name was Teresa Lee. She came here on a visitor's visa, overstayed, and became the first dreamer, the person who inspired me to put in the DREAM Act 16 years ago. One little thing I ought to add. Teresa was 2 years old when she was brought in on a visitor's visa. She didn't realize till much later in life that her mom didn't file the right papers and that she was here illegally. So there are some who are culpable, I'm sure, and have made a decision they're going to overstay their visas and see what happens. There are many, though, who may be innocent. And as we categorize people, let's at least be mindful of the fact that they're different people in different circumstances. Recently, for the second year in a row, the Department of Homeland Security released a report estimating the number of visa overstays in the previous year. This report found that in fiscal year 2016, last year, more than 739,000 people overstayed their visas in the United States. What this tells us is that an obsession with building a big, beautiful wall won't come close to solving our immigration challenges. It doesn't even address the issue of overstays. Even if we build a wall across the entire southern border at a cost of $70 billion or whatever, hundreds of thousands of people who come to our country legally would still be overstaying their visas. We can't talk about visa overstays without considering the reality of Teresa Lee, who I mentioned earlier, and many others who came here years ago, have made a life, started a family, become pillars in a community. All of those should not be treated the same as those who made a conscious effort to deceive the federal government. It's clear we can't fix our broken immigration system on a piecemeal basis. So a few years ago, a group of us got together, 4 Democrats, 4 Republican senators, so-called Gang of 8. We sat down and for 6 months decided to write a comprehensive bipartisan immigration reform bill. We sent it to the floor of the Senate after going through lengthy hearings in the Senate Judiciary Committee, entertaining hundreds of amendments, many of them from our current Attorney General. And then we brought it to the floor for a vote, and it passed 68-32, comprehensive immigration reform in 2013. We were pretty proud of ourselves. Unfortunately, many Republicans didn't support it, and the Republican leadership in the House of Representatives refused to even consider it when we sent it over there. Let me tell you what our bill would have done when it came to visa overstays. We'd have required electronic tracking of visa overstays. And it wasn't an unfunded mandate with no teeth. The bill would have appropriated millions of dollars to implement electronic tracking of visas. And at the insistence of my Republican colleagues in the Gang of 8, we would have required an integrated electronic exit system to be in use at every international air and seaport in the country before undocumented immigrants could obtain lawful permanent residence under the bill. This trigger would have forced those who support a path to citizenship to ensure that electronic tracking of overstays actually came to pass. We weren't soft on this issue. We were tough, and we put money behind our toughness. Critically, our bill also would have addressed other components of the broken immigration system, dedicating billions of dollars to strengthen border security, including funding for additional technology, fencing, and border patrol agents, reducing the job magnet for undocumented immigrants by requiring employers to verify the immigration status of workers and create new avenues for legal immigration, provide a tough but fair path to citizenship for undocumented immigrants who do not pose any threat to our nation and who would go to the back of the line. Only a comprehensive plan like this can secure our border and our nation and really remain true to our heritage as a nation of immigrants. That's why I'm ready to work again on a bipartisan basis to fix this broken immigration system, and it ought to start in this subcommittee. It is refreshing that at least today we're talking about a real problem instead of obsessing about vulnerable refugees who come to the United States, the most carefully vetted and investigated visitors of all those who come to our shores. I strongly supported legislation that has provided up to $1 billion for DHS biometric entry and exit tracking by increasing fees for H-1B visas. Fees increased especially on outsourcing companies that take jobs out of America. This provision was based on bipartisan legislation Senator Grassley and I have co-sponsored for years. But there's much more that Congress and the administration could do. Consider the visa waiver program. Now think about that. We have 38 nations that we allowed to send their visitors to the United States without a visa. According to the recent DHS report in fiscal year 2016, more than 147,000 travelers who entered our country using the visa waiver program overstayed as well. Overstayed, I should say. 20 million people from these 38 nations travel to America every year under the visa waiver program. That's a third of all the visitors to the United States. These people come in without a visa to the United States at American airports without undergoing any biometric checks or consular interviews. Zakaris Moussaoui, the so-called 20th hijacker, 9/11 co-conspirator, tried to enter the U.S. through the visa waiver program. So did Richard Reed, the shoe bomber. Every participant in the 2015 terrorist attack on the Bataclan Theater in Paris held a passport from a visa waiver country, each of them could have traveled to the United States without a visa. If we're concerned about protecting America's security, why don't we strengthen the visa waiver program that accounts, as I said earlier, for 20 million people coming to this country each year? How about strengthening this program by requiring biometric checks of travelers before they reach America, so we know who they are before they get on the airplane? And Congress should also close the loophole. Listen to this. The loophole that lets people who enter the United States through the visa waiver program to buy guns here in this country, even assault weapons, even if they're on the FBI terrorist watch list. Think about that for a second. Does that make any sense? In closing, let me say that it continues to amaze me that we haven't had a single hearing in this immigration subcommittee on President Trump's travel bans and changes to our immigration system. In just his first week as president, Mr. Trump signed multiple immigration executive orders that have roiled our nation so he could keep his campaign promise of launching mass deportations and banning Muslims from our country. The Supreme Court of the United States has found the time to consider the president's travel ban. This subcommittee is not. During the previous administration, the Republican majority conducted sustained, multiple oversight hearings of the executive branch immigration policies of President Obama. I had hoped this subcommittee would be just as vigorous when it comes to the Trump administration. Not yet. Finally, I want to note I'm disappointed that the Trump administration decided not to send a witness from the State Department for this hearing. The State Department plays a critical role in the visa process, and our subcommittee would have benefited from that testimony.
Thank you, Senator Durbin. And I'd have to acknowledge your long-standing efforts in this regard, even though you and I have some differences on what's attainable and what's not. I've come to the conclusion that a comprehensive immigration reform bill is not possible, and I know that is disappointing to you and some others. Unfortunately, our philosophy has been we want everything or we want nothing, and we end up getting nothing, in my view. And so I'm happy to try to work with you where we can to try to address some of the issues that you've addressed. And while there's a lot of other topics we could talk about on the subcommittee, I think this is certainly worthwhile. At this point, Chairman Grassley, chairman of the full committee, has asked that his full statement be included in the record, and it will be done so without objection. If I can ask the witnesses please to stand, and I'll administer the oath. You'll raise your right hand. Do you affirm that the testimony you're about to give before the committee will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you. Please have a seat. What we'd like to do, Mr. Doherty, we'll start with you and then go down the line to Mr. Wagner, Mr. Rhodey, and Mr. Roth. And please, if you will give us your opening statement in about 5 minutes or so, and then I'm sure we'll have a lot of questions.
Thank you. Chairman Cornyn, Ranking Member Durbin, and distinguished members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to appear today to discuss the work in progress at the Department of Homeland Security to identify, report, and address overstays. Some 50 million non-immigrant visitors enter the United States each year. They enter for business, to study, to see family, or to vacation here. The United States welcomes these visitors while recognizing that it's imperative they depart the country when their visas or period of authorized admission expires. Our ability to identify foreign nationals who overstay their visa is important for numerous reasons. Chief among them, we need to determine whether or not individuals pose a threat to national security or to public safety, and we need to protect the integrity of our immigration system by removing those who are present in violation of law. I'll use my time to focus on the fiscal year 2016 Entry-Exit Overstay Report and steps that we are taking to address the findings in the report. As you know, DHS released the FY16 Overstay Report in May. It's the second such report issued in over 20 years, and it contains important data not available in the FY15 version. The 15 report covered visa waiver program travelers and visitors for business or pleasure, B1s and B2s. The 16 report has been expanded to include foreign students, exchange visitors, and other classes of non-immigrants. Our ability to add these classes to our analysis is the result of investments made by the Department to expand its data collection and analytical capabilities. The 2016 report reflects that nearly 99% of in-scope non-immigrant visitors departed the United States on time and abided by the terms of their admission. Despite this high level of compliance by visitors to our country, an unacceptable number of individuals overstayed their visas or period of authorized stay. Approximately 39,000 of them were calculated to have overstayed by the end of fiscal year 16. We ran those numbers again in July, and by our calculations, 426,000 of those non-immigrant visitors are still here and in an unlawful status. Clearly, overstays are a significant problem. To get a better understanding of the challenge presented by overstays, DHS has to continue to make improvements to its IT infrastructure and to its architecture so that agents and other operators have rapid access to the highest quality data available. DHS has undertaken a number of systems enhancements to reinforce immigration and overstay enforcement by aligning requirements across our systems to support the exchange and operational use of immigration and traveler data. We've also been working on identifying national security overstays through increased collaboration with the intelligence community. And finally, we are automating processes that are currently done by hand. DHS is addressing the areas for improvement identified by the DHS Office of Inspector General in his recent report. In particular, the DHS Office of the Chief Information Officer is building an enterprise information sharing platform that will be able to mitigate many of the issues that are identified in the OIG report. It will provide analysts and mission operators with near real-time access to consolidated Homeland Security data in classified and unclassified environments in a manner that is consistent with law, policy, and privacy requirements. DHS has to implement the biometric exit to increase the quality and availability of overstay data. While implementation of a robust and efficient biometric exit solution will take time and poses significant technical and physical challenges, DHS is aggressively identifying or advancing the development of a comprehensive biometric exit system for air, land, and sea. This conforms with long-standing congressional intent and is a priority for the administration as well. DHS also acknowledges and appreciates the support that Congress has given it and that this committee has given it in favor of implementing that system. As stated in the President's executive orders, the need to enhance vetting and screening to identify individuals who seek to enter the United States on a fraudulent basis is a priority, as is the concern that those who overstay or otherwise violate the terms of their visa might pose threats to national security and to public safety. DHS will continue working hard with its partner agencies, particularly with the Department of State, to address the problem presented by overstays. DHS will both seek out innovative solutions and work with governments of countries whose travelers overstay at high rates because they need to be held accountable as partner countries. Chairman Cornyn, Ranking Member Durbin, distinguished members of the subcommittee, thank you for this opportunity to testify today on this important issue, and I look forward to your questions.
Mr. Doherty, forgive me. Of course, you're the Assistant Secretary for Border, Immigration, and Trade Policy at the Department of Homeland Security, and of course, no stranger to this committee, having served as a legislative counsel for Senator John Kyle of Arizona, and of course, staff member with the Subcommittee on Terrorism, Technology, and Homeland Security. Let me just briefly also introduce our other members. Inspector General of the Department of Homeland Security, John Roth, confirmed on March 6, 2014, and who served most recently as Director of the Office of Criminal Investigations at the Food and Drug Administration, and was nominated to lead the DHS Office of Inspector General by President Obama. Mr. Wagner is the Deputy Executive Assistant Commissioner of the Office of Field Operations of the U.S. Customs and Border Protection since 2014. And he's been assigned to the U.S. Customs and Border Protection at headquarters in D.C. since 1999 and has worked on numerous policy issues. And, of course, Mr. Rohde is the Deputy Assistant Director of Homeland Security Investigations within the National Security Investigations Division and Homeland Security Investigations. And we appreciate, again, all of you being here present. Let me turn to you, Mr. Wagner, for your opening statement.
Thank you. Chairman Cornyn, Ranking Member Durbin, and distinguished members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to discuss Customs and Border Protection's work on biometric exit and the recent Overstay report. First, let me start with the Overstay report. This report accounts for 96% of all Air and Sea non-immigrant admissions for fiscal year 2016 at our Air and Sea locations. We've expanded the report this year to include additional categories of visitors, such as foreign students, exchange visitors, and certain worker classifications. Last fiscal year, there were approximately 50.4 million in-scope non-immigrant admissions through the Air and Sea locations who are expected to depart. Of this number, we calculated the total overstay rate at approximately 1.47%, which is about 739,000 individuals. At the end of the fiscal year, when the report was compiled, there remained about 628,000 of these visitors still in the U.S. Due to continuing departures, that number is currently at about 425,000 today, which is about 0.84% of the total. Now, these figures are generated using CBP's Arrival and Departure Information System, where we use our travel data and commercial carrier manifest to identify potential overstays. The data is correlated against other DHS systems to eliminate individuals who have received extensions or adjusted status and remain lawfully in the U.S. The overstay lists are then run through our automated targeting system, which applies ICE-defined criteria to prioritize these records, and the information is provided to ICE daily. Adding biometrics to this exit process will provide even greater validation of the data. This committee is familiar with the many challenges we've discussed in developing a feasible biometric exit solution, as well as the many pilots we've conducted over the years. I recognize your frustration with our pace at this. I also recognize that Congress has made up to $1 billion available over the next decade to support funding and implementing this program. As I've said publicly before, we're out of time and we're out of excuses. So the good news is we figured out a very feasible solution. We've had extensive discussions with private sector technology experts and stakeholders to ensure that our solution is easy for travelers and avoids adding yet another independent stovepiped process. It utilizes existing airport infrastructure and can be compatible with existing airline business practices. And most importantly, it uses data already provided to the U.S. government. The biggest factor in our struggle to find a solution was really relying too much on finding a single piece of technology that was magically going to solve this problem for us. And previous efforts never really took a comprehensive look at re-engineering the processes behind how our data systems function. So we figured out a way to better position the data we already have on travelers, which is photographs, to make this inspection process a lot more efficient. In non-technical terms, we've moved the photographs we already have of travelers from their passports and their visas. In advance of the flight, we move it out of the main database, which contains about 1 billion photographs, and stages it in a single database just based on that manifest. By doing this, when the person goes to board the plane, we can take their picture and only search the pictures on that manifest rather than against the 1 billion photographs that reside in the database. This makes it quick, simple, and efficient, and you don't have to actually read the passport first to do this. All the other systems around the world, you have to read the travel document first. That adds time, that adds infrastructure, and that adds complexity. We can skip it by doing this. So we put this to test in Atlanta with a flight with Delta Airlines. We pre-positioned the photographs in the gallery. We compared a live photograph of the person boarding to the traveler boarding a plane, and we created a biometric record of the departure. So this validated our concept on how to use the data. We did not slow down the boarding of the plane, and it fit with the boarding process and the operational model of how the airline boards their passengers. This is easy for travelers to use. Everybody knows how to take a picture. So to date, we've processed about 35,000 travelers through this demonstration over the last 10, 11 months. And we're at a matching rate of about 96 to 98% of travelers we have photographs on. So we've had extension discussions with the air travel industry. This summer, we started rolling out additional demonstrations of this capability. In addition to the Delta flight in Atlanta, we have a single flight we're using this on at Dulles, Chicago, and Houston, with additional locations to come this summer. And we're also working with JetBlue in Boston on using the same process, not only for biometric exit, but for the purposes of replacing the paper boarding pass with the same picture taking of the person confirmed by us, so it'll serve two purposes. We're also working closely with Delta Airlines on similar issues. So there's a great opportunity here for us not only to complete the biometric exit requirement, but also to support airline and airport modernization efforts so we're all aligned in a single vision. My final point is that while facial recognition will be used, we will continue to collect fingerprints from foreign nationals upon initial encounters. Both biometrics will be fused together in our systems, and the fingerprint results are returned by matching the photo associated with them. So we're getting the same vetting results, just a different pointer and a quicker pointer to the same data. So thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Mr. Rhodey?
Chairman Cornyn, Ranking Member Durbin, and distinguished members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to talk to you today on how ICE Homeland Security Investigations, or HSI, investigates visa overstays, and to highlight the improvements that HSI has implemented in overstay enforcement. HSI's Counterterrorism and Criminal Exploitation Unit, CTCEU, focuses on identifying and prioritizing its enforcement efforts on overstays who remain in the country and who may pose a concern to national security or public safety. On a daily basis, HSI ingests approximately 3,000 potential overstay leads. These leads come from U.S. Customs and Border Protection's Arrival and Departure Information System, ADIS, HSI's Student and Exchange Visitor Information System, SEVIS, and from other referrals on foreign nationals who may have overstayed or otherwise violated the terms of their admission to the U.S. The leads received by CTCEU undergo both an automated and manual vetting processes based on prioritized risk-based framework. CTCEU then creates lead packages that include all available information, which are sent to HSI field offices nationwide for further investigation. CTCEU's vetting process is designed to detect and identify individuals exhibiting specific risk factors based on intelligence reporting, travel patterns, and in-depth criminal research and analysis. To further support this process, HSI chairs the Compliance Enforcement Advisory Panel, or CEAP, comprised of subject matter experts from other law enforcement agencies and members of the intelligence community who assist CTCEU in maintaining targeting methods in accordance with the most current threat information. The CEAP convenes quarterly to discuss recent intelligence developments and update CTCEU's targeting framework in order to consistently focus targeting efforts on overstays and status violators who pose the greatest concern to national security. In fiscal year 16, HSI reviewed approximately 1.2 million unvalidated overstay leads. Numerous leads were closed through the aforementioned vetting process due to subsequent departures from the United States, a change in status, and/or pending immigration benefits. Those leads that did not meet HSI's threat criteria were referred to ICE's enforcement and removal operations for further action. Of the fiscal year 2016 overstay leads remaining within HSI's purview, 4,116 lead packages were sent to HSI field offices for further investigation. Of those leads, as of June 30th this year, HSI special agents had made 1,622 arrests. Those subjects who cannot be located are cycled back into continuous monitoring for further research as new information is revealed. I would also like to state that we've sent out 1,000 more leads this fiscal year than were sent out in the entire fiscal year 2016. Additionally, we at HSI are committed to always improving and advancing our capabilities as technology progresses and as resources allow, and overstay enforcement is no exception. I'd like to take a moment to highlight two recent pilot programs in overstay enforcement and our efforts to improve our IT systems and capabilities. First, our Overstay Lifecycle pilot is an effort to ensure continuous vetting. Last year, HSI started tracking non-immigrant visitors who file visa applications at certain visa security program posts from the time they apply through their departure from the United States. This continuous review allows HSI to take swift action should derogatory information be uncovered at any point in the visa life cycle. Second, HSI implemented the Domestic Mantis program to identify non-immigrant students who enter the United States to study in a non-sensitive academic field and who subsequently transfer to a sensitive academic field or who attempt to work in areas posing concern to national security or public safety. In addition, HSI has been an integral partner in improving the data interfaces between DHS systems to refine our ability to identify overstays. Through modernization of LeadTrack and SEVIS, we are advancing DHS information sharing and expediting overstay vetting. A number of ongoing initiatives at DHS are streamlining and enhancing systems to provide person-centric rather than event-specific data, which will allow us to better prioritize our cases. Before concluding, let me emphasize how seriously we take the recommendations from OIG and GAO reviews. When the latest OIG report came out, immediate action was taken in response to the concerns raised about field training and overstay investigations. The CTCEU Overstay Handbook and guidance were redistributed to all HSI field offices and agents. This handbook provides detailed instructions on how to conduct overstay investigations, including what systems to check. Furthermore, HSI has reinvigorated regional training efforts to ensure that all our agents and officers are equipped to effectively and efficiently investigate these leads. One such training session has already occurred, and 3 more are scheduled for this fiscal year. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to explain HSI's critical role in the overstay enforcement process. I'm happy to answer questions.
Thank you. Mr. Roth?
Chairman Cornyn, Ranking Member Durbin, and members of the subcommittee, thank you for inviting me here today to testify to discuss our work relating to visa overstays, including our most recent audit report. The result of our audit revealed that DHS's information technology systems do not effectively support ICE's visa tracking operations for a number of reasons. First, identifying and investigating potential visa overstays requires pulling data from dozens of systems and databases, some of which are not integrated and do not electronically share information. This is necessary because 4 different DHS components, ICE, CBP, USCIS, and the National Protection and Programs Directorate, as well as numerous entities outside of DHS, are all involved in managing the overstay issue. Much of the data is not stored in easily retrievable fields. As an illustration of the disjointed nature of the IT systems involved, ICE investigators need to retain up to 40 different passwords, each with different access restrictions and expiration dates. Second, access to real-time data is hampered by system access restrictions. ICE personnel sometimes are unable to gain access to USCIS systems despite having a need to do so. Some data is retained in paper-based files, which can take considerable time to access, and some systems are not frequently updated. Third, ICE personnel did not have the training and guidance they needed to effectively identify and utilize the numerous systems used for visa overstay tracking. ICE personnel in the field are not always sure which systems to use to perform their specific job functions. Personnel we met with at multiple locations expressed concerns that they were unaware of all the systems available to them across DHS components and agencies, potentially limiting their effectiveness in carrying out their visa tracking responsibilities. Lastly, in the absence of a comprehensive biometric exit system at U.S. ports, DHS relies on third-party data, such as passenger lists from airlines, which is not always accurate and fails to capture land departure data, which accounts for the vast majority of visitors leaving the United States. These deficiencies have a significant real-world impact, including a backlog of 1.2 million visa overstay cases, an inability to estimate with any degree of confidence the number of individuals who are actually overstaying, which results in a poor understanding of the problem and incomplete reporting. Considerable resources are wasted investigating thousands of leads that could have been ruled as not leads, such as individuals who already left the country or received immigration benefits. In fact, we found that HSI agents spent 40% of the caseload investigating individuals they should not be investigating, largely because they were in compliance with the law or had already left the country. Part of the problem is that the department has historically done a poor job of requiring IT integration, which results in a fragmented and decentralized system. The DHS Chief Information Officer should provide greater oversight and centralized management of DHS IT systems. This has been a long-standing issue that we have repeatedly reported on. Additionally, the ICE Chief Information Officer must provide adequate training and guidance to personnel in the field about how to properly use the current data systems. Finally, CBP must continue to work on moving forward on the biometric entry-exit system, which will assist in streamlining ICE's investigative efforts. We made 5 recommendations in our audit report, which we believe will assist in making the process more efficient. Pleased to report that the department has agreed with each of our recommendations and is implementing corrective action. We will monitor the progress of the department and make reports as needed. Additionally, we intend to audit the department's efforts to implement the pilot biometric exit program you heard described today. This concludes my testimony. I'd be happy to answer any questions you or members of the committee may have.
Thanks to all of you for that. I'll start out with the 5-minute rounds questions, but I wonder if anybody can give me their best estimate of how many people are currently in the country overstaying their visa in violation of our immigration laws. Can anybody come up with a round number estimate?
Sir, I just hazard that the 40% rate that Senator Durbin referenced earlier. It's one, as you know, sir, that we've mentioned for a long period of time.
Thank you, Mr. Dougherty. I know the 40%, I'm just wondering 40% of what is kind of what I'm trying to get my head around. And Mr. Wagner, isn't it true that some of the statistics that we've been talking about that are contained in your written testimony and elsewhere, this is just for land and seaports, correct? We don't have any reliable figures for land port of entry or exit, do we?
Correct. It's for commercial air and commercial sea arrivals, but most of your land entry and exits are populations that are out of scope of the collection of biometrics. Actually, a small fraction of the in-scope population we would even track on biometric exit.
Well, I appreciate the good work that you've been able to do and the good news, frankly, in terms of airports and seaports, but to me that seems like a huge gaping hole in our data. That's what happens at land ports, and frankly, coming from a state with 1,200 miles of common border and about 5 million jobs depending on binational trade with Mexico, we want to make sure that we continue to have legitimate commerce and travel between our countries because it's good for both of our economies. But we've got to come up with perhaps some of these technology solutions you're working on, whether it's facial recognition or the like, that ultimately is going to help us identify people as they leave the country and enter the country so that we have a reliable figures. And I know that's something that you continue to work on, but frankly, in the years I've been here in the Senate, since we've been talking about the implementation of the U.S. visit program, this has already been a matter of policy by the United States government, but we've never quite seemed to get the solution where it needs to be. So just to put some more meat on the bone here, there are about 50 some odd million visitors to the country every year, and about 8 million of those, to the best of my estimate, are come in across land ports of entry. And so that gives us some idea of the whole in our data in terms of the overall scope of the problem. I'm aware that some countries, when students come study, for example, in their countries, they require the student to produce evidence of financial support so they don't become a burden on the host country. They may even require them to produce health insurance to demonstrate that they won't be a burden, again, on the healthcare system of the host country. And they'll require them to check in on a periodic basis to make sure they maintain their current status that as a legitimate visitor. What things do we do in the United States, or what things might we do to help address this problem? Because my sense is we really don't do it unless somebody commits a crime and comes in contact with the criminal justice system. That's probably the only time we catch people who overstay their visa. And even there, we have spotty cooperation. Everybody's familiar with the idea of sanctuary cities, and some locations decide they're not going to cooperate with federal law enforcement. So I'd be interested to hear from you, what mechanisms do we need to put in place? For example, how about more frequent check-ins in the United States that are for visas or for longer than 6 months? Would that help?
Sir, there was some press recently about the Department of Homeland Security looking at the potential to determine whether or not students need to be checked every year to make sure that they are in status. In other words, they are in fact attending classes and they are just sort of remaining in that student status. As you know from the numbers that are in the back of this report for the F visas, for the student visas, the non-compliance is markedly rather high. So that's a thing that's being considered by the department. It's not a policy at this point, as no decisions have been made. The ability of the department to keep track of folks without impeding trade and travel, and as you know, the overwhelming number of people coming here are leaving on time. If we can do more to cover that gap in our capability of knowing where people are, we'll take reasonable looks at that, but we want to also be conscious of people's privacy concerns, and also we want to be conscious of what the cost would be and how it might inhibit our travel and trade.
And I do agree with Senator Durbin that the idea of visa waiver countries is another whole issue. But in order to comply with the visa waiver program, they have to have a very low rate of overstays, is my understanding, as part of that criteria by which those countries qualify. But it is a vulnerability. Senator Durbin.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Doherty, if you're going to check on student visas, is it not a requirement of these students on visa to notify our government if they change address?
Sir, my understanding is under SEVIS right now, it's the requirement of the school that you're attending that there is an officer there that's responsible for notifying DHS that you are still in status.
I'm asking about change of address, though, change of residence or address of a student.
I apologize, sir. I don't know the answer to that.
I think it may be a requirement. The only point I'm getting to is when I think back of all the flop house apartments I stayed in and moved in and out of, there could be a technical violation of a real student, and that's, I guess, is a concern that I have going in.
I understand, sir, and I think that's one of the things that, as I said earlier, all these systems need to be pragmatic. They need to reflect reality. Students move around. Students are young. A lot of them, in terms of when you think about overstays, they may not take the thing as seriously as other people might. But, yeah, you want a system that is one that is easy to use. The immigration system initially, I think, was supposed to be that kind of system.
I guess what I'm asking you, easy is maybe the word, but I'm looking for one that's sensible.
Yeah.
That really, if you're a student who just didn't notify the fact that my landlord evicted me and now I had to move to a new place and I didn't send the notice in on time, that I hope a technical violation like that wouldn't end your student visa. What about this whole aspect of visa waiver countries? 38 countries where if you just hold their passport, you can come into the United States for up to 90 days without going through getting a visa to do so. And I think someone came up with a number of 140,000 overstays among those. I don't know if that number is right. Mr. Wagner, did you mention that earlier?
Yes, about 147,000.
147,000. And then that's a group of 20,000 visa waiver program visitors, 20 million visa waiver program visitors each year to the United States. Then another 30 million coming in with visas for a variety of different reasons, and you think the overstay rate there is closer to 739,000? Is that out of the 30 million?
No, 739,000 includes both categories, the visa holders and the visa waiver. The visa waiver rate is lower than the visa holders overall.
So we're talking 50 million visitors, some with visas, some without, and making sure they leave when they said they were going to, when they're supposed to. That's really our challenge, right? And we are trying to find, I think, Mr. Roth, I want to turn to you now. You took a look at our efforts. We've been at this a long time, haven't we? Talking about how we're going to track these folks and make sure they leave when they're supposed to?
That's correct. The biometric exit requirement had been in law for quite some time, but again, we're still in the pilot phase process.
How long have we been in the pilot phase? Senator Tilla says it's Kitty Hawk. How long have we been at this?
It is a requirement by law, but I don't, on the top of my head, I can't remember when that law was enacted. I will have to say that it was a department responsibility, and only recently has it become a CBP responsibility. Our perception is that CBP is moving forward expeditiously. We're going to be auditing what their pilot program looks like, so we'll be able to report back exactly whether or not we have forward momentum.
Senator Durbin, I'm advised the U.S. visit law passed in 1996, so it's been a matter of U.S. policy since then.
21 years. We're still working on it. Let me ask you this, Mr. Roth. I want to go back to President Trump's executive orders on travel, which are controversial. But Senator Duckworth and I sent the DHS Office of Inspector General a letter requesting an independent investigation into the implementation by DHS of President Trump's executive order. The Inspector General subsequently opened an investigation. Can you tell me the status?
Sure. We are done with most of our field work. In other words, gathering documents and conducting interviews. We're in the process of drafting a report. My best guess, again, it's not a promise, but it's an estimate that we will have that out by September.
Okay. Good. I want to see where that might go. And it was initially created to give the administration 90 days to establish extreme vetting for certain nations. Well, I think we're in the 6th month now since the initial designation of 7 countries, I believe initially was how they did it. So it'd be interesting to see what did happen. Is there any, can I ask any of you if you have any thoughts about biometric requirement on visa waiver visitors? Understanding that whatever requirement we put on visa waiver countries, they're likely to put on us. Understandable. So if I have to have my picture taken, Mr. Wagner, you were explaining that process. Is this feasible, recommended, to have those in the visa waiver program submit some biometric information before they arrive in this country?
I think as we build out this facial recognition capability, that's one of the things we're going to take under consideration and see what usability or utility there could be. I mean, it's going to be unconfirmed information because we're receiving it directly from a person. You know, there's some value of what you can do with it to reaffirm later on that that's the same person you granted that authorization to. So let us work on it a little bit as we build out the biometric exit facial recognition capability, and I think, you know, we'll find out how we can implement this.
Just worry that you might put it in a pilot program. Thank you. Thanks to all of you.
Senator Tillis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and gentlemen, thank you for being here. I did want to say that Senator Durbin touched on some points that I happen to agree with in terms of other aspects of immigration that I won't bring up here. But yeah, we've got a little bit of a hairball here in terms of our visa programs. We've got serious issues with H-1B, H-2B. I could go down the list. We've got a mismatch of resources out there. We've got people making arbitrary decisions about who can come in and fill jobs, and they're shutting down industries. That's not the subject of this committee, but it does speak to the broader issue of us coming up with a rational, modernized, predictable overall visa system. Now, I think, Mr. Doherty, this may be a question for you. Has the methodology changed for calculating visa overstays between FY15 and FY16? To your knowledge?
Sir, I think it got a little bit more sophisticated in the sense that we were able to draw in additional data sets.
Does that mean we're more accurate or just more sophisticated?
Well, let's see. I think when we're able to get more, obviously, and we're trying to look at the entire population that's coming at us, whatever their visa status, which is why at the end of the day, if we got our biometric pilot finished, we'd be at a place where we'd see those land entries as well and the exits as well. So the intention, and it's fairly new for the department to have the capability. Again, we hadn't issued one of these reports in 20 years. It was done last year, and then, of course, it was done again this year. So the intention is to get a full view. The methodology remains very manual and hard to do. It's a lot of work to produce these numbers. We want to get past that.
Thank you. Of the 426,000 number that you all mentioned, are those in-country overstays? I think you gave that estimate, that the 2017 estimate is somewhere, was it 426,000? Did I hear you say that in your opening testimony or in response to one of the questions?
Yes, sir. That was in my, I believe, John, that was in my opening.
And those are in-country overstays?
That is our conclusion,
Can you just, I know the answer, but just for the benefit of others, can you describe the difference between in-country and out-of-country overstays?
Well, when you're an out-of-country overstay, you're somebody who was supposed to have left at a particular time. You didn't, but then you left.
Gotcha.
And in-country overstays is you were supposed to have left and you didn't leave, you're still here.
Yep. Mr. Wagner, the discussion about the wall, I happen to be in the camp that thinks it's not a good idea to say we don't need borders, we need bridges, because there's a homeland security threat that needs to be dealt with. I'm also not in the camp that says we need a structure that goes from the Pacific to the Gulf of Mexico that can be seen from outer space, mainly because many of your colleagues have said that that would not be the best way to secure the border and to provide for their own personal security, the Border Patrol agents down there. So this is more of a statement. I have a related question. It seems to me when we're talking about the people, technology, and infrastructure to secure a border, a lot of that technology and infrastructure could be directed towards the land ports where people are coming in and stepping up resources and capabilities in those borders. Do you believe, or are you one of the people that think we ought to be able to view a wall from outer space? Or do you think that that money may be better spent to secure the border and know who's here and when they're coming and going, maybe through the use of PTF?
What I will say is we're working on the same facial recognition plan for the land border as well, too, to look at arrivals and departures and a similar approach using the facial recognition.
Do you agree, though, that that's part and parcel to an effort to secure the border? I mean, that provides an element of border security because we have a better, more accurate picture of who's coming across the border and who's not leaving when they're supposed to?
Yes.
Okay. The airlines, I know this was about a year or two ago when we had, I think, a hearing on this. I heard from a number of the airlines that, at least at the time, they were concerned with the disruption in the terminals because, if you know, a number of international flights are commingled with domestic flights, and they were trying to get their head around how they could do this without it being kind of an unfunded mandate on their part. Is this pilot getting y'all to a point? It sounds like you're doing some things that may make it easier for boarding, so there could be a netting or a wash here. Are you getting a sense that the airlines are coming closer to embracing some of the strategies that you're testing?
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. You know, we tried to build a process that could easily complement what the airlines are also doing. So like we saw with JetBlue wanting to automate the boarding pass and the boarding process using facial recognition, well, why don't we combine our efforts and just take one picture of the person and confirm with the data we have, because the airline tells us who's expected on the flight. We've got the photos, so just search against that. We confirm back, confirm biometric exit at the same time, confirm for the airline that the person boards, and they check off in their system what seat it is. You as the traveler don't have to go through a multiple gauntlet of cameras or processes to do this. So
that makes a lot of sense. Hopefully we'll see a pilot or an implementation in Charlotte sometime soon. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Blumenthal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for holding this hearing, which addresses a critically important topic for our whole nation, and certainly for anyone thinking about how to improve our immigration system. I take it all of you would agree with me that the lack of a biometric exit system is a gaping hole, a really deepening threat to our national security.
Sir, if I can venture an answer to that, which is a little bit off the bubble, but I'd like to express it. We talked about comprehensive immigration reform as we moved into the hearing, and one of the things that makes it very difficult to really do anything, including to feel good about your national security, is knowing who's come and who's left. Without those two things, you cannot have a guest worker program that is viable. You have great difficulty in being open to foreign nationals who want to come here to study or to just enjoy the country. And in terms of the security dimension of it as well, it does constitute a problem. If you can't count people in and you can't count them out, you don't have integrity in your system.
I'm going to count that as a yes.
Yes, sir.
And say further that we can pass all the great laws in the world, but if we don't know who's coming into the country and who's leaving, they are all for naught. Correct? You're shaking your head. Let the record show that indicates agreement. Let me just go on. The number, as I read your testimony, the number of overstays went from 739,478 individuals to 425,495 individuals as between 2016 and 2017. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
And what accounts for that drop?
People leave. That's basically how it goes. The way that the information is put together for this report is the bias is in favor of assuming the person is still here unlawfully unless we know better.
But
So
when you say people leave, and I apologize for interrupting you, but I have limited time. When you say people leave, what is the reason that they leave at a greater rate in 2017 versus 2016? Is it something you're doing, or is it
I think it's
climate change, or whatever?
Yeah, I think they just go. So this report concluded in FY16. So since if you go around the clock and around the calendar until today, until July, those are the folks that remain of the people who were expected to leave the country. So we expected 700 some thousand to go in 16 because that's how long they were entitled to remain. Then we come around to this point of time in the year, July 1st, and that's how many actually have remained past the time that the report terminated.
So that is an explanation of the numbers, but not an explanation of the reduced rate of overstay. I'm just wondering whether it is because people who are overstayers somehow are fearful they'll be apprehended, or whether there is a deterrent impact of all this talk about abuse of the system, or whether it's just that there's some kind of statistical quirk. And maybe rather than, press you on it now, you can get back to us about it. The other area that I want to explore is I note that the overstay rate is greater for the non-visa waiver program, correct? And why is that?
I think that many of the countries that are within the visa waiver program, as you know, they have to meet certain standards of information sharing. They also have to have a low non-immigrant refusal rate, non-immigrant visa refusal rate. So if, for example, country X came to you, foreign nationals wanted to come to the United States, and 25% of them you said, no, I think you're actually an intending immigrant, then that is a metric that comes out of the consulate experience. And so we basically don't allow those people into the VWP. So countries that are whose nationals are essentially compliant are the types of people that make visa waiver partners.
They tend to be more reliable in terms of staying only as long as they have a visa.
That's correct, sir. Yes, sir.
And forgive me if there's an obvious answer to this question, but we have these numbers on how many people have overstayed. Do you also have numbers, maybe I missed them in your report, on how long those overstays are as a median or an average? In other words, is it a couple of days? Is it weeks? Is it years? Do you have any numbers that reflect the severity of their overstays?
I don't believe we've chopped the data that way. We'd be happy to brief you on it if we have those metrics.
I'd appreciate it. Okay. And here's another, maybe there's an obvious answer. You have the numbers on people who have overstayed. Those are just numbers, they're not identities. Do you also have a list of those people? In other words, in the computer that produces these numbers, do you also have names, dates of arrival, and apparent non-departures, and last known address, and all of that information?
I believe that that's true, but I would have to validate that, sir.
Could you check that? Because otherwise I don't know how you would know what the numbers are. You must know specific individuals who have not left, and that's the way the numbers are built. I'm just reasoning from common sense.
That would have to be correct, right? Whether or not we maintained a list and is a question that I don't have an answer to at this time.
And finally, if you would give me just another question, Mr. Chairman. In your testimony, you make reference to overstay enforcement, and you say that you prioritize violators, I'm quoting, who may pose a national security or public safety risk, end of quote. I can imagine what those factors might be. Perhaps you could tell us what they are. And I hate to ask another sort of question that may have an obvious answer. If you know they're a risk now, why were they allowed into the country?
If I could, sir, I'd defer to HSI on answering those enforcement questions for Interior.
Sir, we have an internal prioritization scheme that we use to prioritize potential national security concerns and or concerns for national security as well as concerns for public safety. It doesn't mean that the person is necessarily a threat, but by our own internal prioritization scheme, as we look at the whole list of overstays or potential overstays that we receive, we have to, because we have limited resources, we have to come up with a prioritization scheme as to who may pose those type of risks for us. So we have a sliding scale of what we consider to be a concern. I don't want to use the word threat because we don't know if they're a threat until we do the investigation. So they're a concern. So those leads are then subsequently scrubbed through our system through an automated process first, and then it goes into a manual process where you determine whether or not a person meets that criteria, and a lead is generated for further investigation by the field.
I understand you don't want to use the word risk, or rather, you don't want to use the word threat. You'd rather use the word concern, but Mr. Doherty uses the word risk in his testimony. So I take it that is a little bit more than a concern. And if you could provide us, because I don't want to take more time, I'm already way above my time, and the chairman has been very gracious, as he always is. But if you could get back to us with an analysis of how you determine what the concern or the risk is, what the factors are, what the criteria, how you apply them. You may have done it already in your testimony, but I apologize that I haven't seen it.
Yes, sir, absolutely. We can get back to you with that.
Thanks a lot. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Gentlemen, if I can ask for your help to summarize what I think we've heard so far. Roughly 739,000 visa overstays from land and seaports, but no record of visa overstays from land-based ports of entry, where approximately 8 million people have come into the country over a year's time. So let's say 739,000 land and seaports. We know that the 9/11 attack was committed, 19 out of the hijackers, 5 of them were visa overstays. Surely not everybody who overstays their visa is a national security threat, to your point, Mr. Roddy. But just so we can understand, how do you identify those 739,000 people, to Senator Blumenthal's point, and what do we need to do in order to make sure that we're enforcing the terms of their visa and entry into the country and exit on a timely basis? My impression, Mr. Roddy, and maybe you're the one to take this question, is that we won't do that unless they, let's say, for example, commit an offense and get arrested. That would be one way to identify yourself as a visa overstay, right?
Sir, I'm very glad you asked that question. One of the things that we're doing to address that very issue is linking the vetting programs that we have both on the front end through our visa security program and on the back end through our overstay vetting program. So by linking the two programs together in an overarching life cycle program, we're looking to, at the front end, when the person is vetted, when they apply for a visa, if they make it through that vetting and subsequently enter the United States, we are continuously vetting them while they're here visiting, and then if they potentially become an overstay.
How would you do that?
Through our various database systems as well as social media. But they'll be continuously vetted through their entire visit here, and then if they subsequently become an overstay, we'll be ahead of the game, so to speak. We'll know about them in advance. And that's a process that we've implemented in a pilot basis at 2 visa issuing locations. We intend in the future to expand that program to other visa issuing posts as well, but that's the way of the future for us, and that would be a better way for us to track it.
So I don't want to minimize what you just said because it's important, and we need to recognize progress. But at the same time, I don't think we need to understand what the numbers mean. That wouldn't include visa waiver. That's only people who've applied for a visa at a consulate overseas before they come to the United States. And it's good that you are taking steps to monitor them. But what would cause them to be removed from the United States? What would you have to see in this monitoring program to remove them?
Well, certainly if there's derogatory information developed as a result of their time in the United States, we would send out a lead as a priority 1, something that would make that person removable. So there would have to be derogatory information that would indicate that the person is a definite threat to the U.S. or has committed some sort of a crime while they're here visiting. Absent that, though, if there's only information as to the intention of a person to overstay. For example, in our pilot, we have people talking on social media saying things such as, I made it, finally I'm here, I'm not going back, or I intend to get a job, I intend to stay. Well, now we have an indicator that that person will probably overstay, so we're ahead of the game when they do. But we can't take action on that simply because the person is talking about that they intend to never leave the United States. But at least they're on our radar, so when they do violate their terms of admission, we can take action.
Isn't it more likely than not that if someone will not come to the attention of immigration authorities unless they are arrested for and charged with a crime? Is that the most common way that they're identified?
That's the most common way, yes.
And so if you get a visa from some other country and you come to the United States, you overstay your visa as long as you don't commit a crime, chances are you're going to be able to melt into the great American landscape and stay. Is that a fair statement? Mr. Roth?
Yes, when you look at the numbers that are involved, ICE has limited resources. For example, there's about 10,000 referrals that are made to ICE investigators across the country. What we found was that 40% of that 10,000 were actually not overstays at all. Either they had already left the country or they had gotten some sort of immigration benefit. So already we're down to a universe of 6,000 cases per year, even assuming you're successful at every one of those 6,000 cases when you compare it against the 425,000 actual overstays a year. It's just going to be a tiny fraction of the people who actually get some sort of enforcement action against them.
And this, I think, is important because when most people hear about discussions of local municipalities, cities not cooperating, not recognizing detainers from ICE to hold somebody who's here illegally in the United States, when they choose not to cooperate as a, quote, sanctuary city, that is an impediment to enforcing our immigration laws. I think people sometimes are confused about what that really means, but this further facilitates people who overstay their visa in violation of our laws and who are able to escape removal when their term of their visa expires. Mr. Wagner?
Senator, if I could add a couple of points which I think will clarify both of your questions. So all of the arrivals, land, sea, and air, go into our arrival departure information system. With that, we also capture their authorized period of admission. So there's a ticker on their file.
Yeah, there you go. Like I said.
afternoon. Oh, a couple polite people out there. Earlier this afternoon, the Senate Judiciary Committee concluded the confirmation hearing for Chris Wray, the President's nominee for FBI Director. During his hearing, Chris Wray continually displayed the strong character, deep knowledge, and moral integrity that make him, as former Democrat Senator Sam Nunn testified, the leader the FBI needs at this critical moment. The President looks forward to seeing this incredibly qualified nominee move through the Judiciary Committee and be swiftly confirmed by the full Senate. Also on the Hill today, 3 bills that represent important tools in combating human trafficking are on the floor of the House for a vote. H.R. 2200, which reauthorizes $130 million in funding for the prevention of human trafficking, protection of victims, and prosecution of traffickers. H.R. 2664, which ensures the Department of Labor effectively trains its employees to recognize and respond to the illegal trade of people for exploitation or commercial gain. And lastly, H.R. 2480, which expands the ability of a DOJ program to enable law enforcement agencies to compete for federal funding, specifically to develop and carry out programs that fight sex trafficking demand. President Trump is focused on ending human trafficking and hopes that these bills will pass the House and move to the Senate quickly so we can continue the fight against this horrific practice. While the House takes up these critical bills on human trafficking today, the Senate is continuing its work on a plan to repeal and replace Obamacare. As I've said time and time again, with every day that goes by with this collapsing law still in place, more hardworking Americans see their health care options either disappear entirely or become too costly for their families to use. The President was elected to protect those American families, and he looks forward to seeing the Senate continue to move toward a solution that works for all Americans during the upcoming weeks. Also, on the Hill, the President was glad to see David Nye confirmed as a U.S. District Judge in Idaho by a vote of 100-0. It's unfortunate, though, that this clearly eminently qualified nominee, who was reported out of committee by voice vote, faced more than 30 procedural hurdles forced by Senate Democrats before his unanimous vote. Senate Democrats continue to show the American people that they'd rather play political games with these critical nominations than work with this administration. As the majority leader said, if they continue at this rate, it will take the Senate almost 11 and a half years to confirm the remaining presidential appointments. We're again calling on Senate Democrats to stop brazenly abusing Senate procedure to hold up the President's experienced and accomplished nominees so that he can continue his work on behalf of the American people. We've received several inquiries on what the President's been on his agenda for the past couple of days, so I'd like to read some of that out before I take your questions. He's had multiple meetings with key economic advisors, particularly on issues of trade, such as Ambassador Lighthizer, Treasury Secretary Mnuchin, Commerce Secretary Ross, NEC Director Gary Cohn, and Director of the Office of Trade and Manufacturing Policy Peter Navarro. He's had multiple meetings on cybersecurity with Homeland Security advisors and met separately with his national security team, and a number of meetings with members of his legislative affairs team and the Vice President specifically on health care. Lastly, he had a meeting with his Faith Advisory Board to discuss issues important to the faith community. As you all know, later tonight the President will depart for Paris, France, for meetings and celebrations with America's oldest ally. Tomorrow, the President will have lunch with American military commanders, after which he will join French President Macron for a tour of the French Military Museum. After a bilateral meeting with the President, the two leaders will hold a press conference, and in the evening, President Trump and the First Lady will dine with the President and his wife. On Friday, the President will attend France's annual Bastille Day celebration, the first president to do so since 1989. To commemorate the 100th anniversary of the United States' entry into World War I, the people of France have designated America this year's national guest of honor. Troops from the U.S. Army's 1st Infantry Division, the first unit to arrive on French soil in 1917, will march in the parade, and U.S. Air Force Thunderbirds will conduct a flyover with planes with the French Air Force. And after the parade, the President will return back to the United States. On the topic of previous inquiries, so I like to do my best to get back to you. Yesterday, I received a question from John Gizzi about whether we'd support changing Senate blue slip procedures for judicial nominees. and the White House is deferring to the Senate on this Senate procedure. And we have multiple highly qualified nominees waiting for Senate hearings and hope the Senate can start moving them along quickly. Finally, and lastly, we understand the Chinese hospital treating Nobel Peace Prize laureate and writer Liu Xiaobo has invited U.S., German, and medical experts to China for medical consultations. We remain concerned that both Mr. Liu and his family are unable to communicate with the outside world and that he is not free to seek the medical treatment of his choosing. We continue to call on the Chinese authorities to grant him full parole and to release his wife from house arrest and provide them the protections and freedoms such as freedom of movement and access to appropriate medical care consistent with Chinese constitution, legal system, and international commitments. And with that, I'll take your questions. Phil.
Yeah, Sarah, thanks. Has President Trump had any communication with his son, Donald Trump Jr., over the last several days, and was he involved in helping Donald Trump Jr. craft his statement to the press over the weekend on Air Force One, as was reported in the New York Times?
I'm not sure about specific communications and the nature of those conversations. I know that they've spoken at least some point over the last few days, but beyond that, I don't have any other further details.
With his response?
Not that I'm aware of, but I just don't know the answer to that, Phil.
So is that not true?
I'm telling you, I'm just not sure. I don't know the answer. I'll have to check and let you know. Yeah. Matthew.
Thank you. You opened today by talking about the strong character and integrity of Christopher Wray. He said during the hearing today that he does not consider Mueller's probe to be a witch hunt. Neither do Republican leaders in Congress, neither does Rod Rosenstein of the Justice Department. So why does the president continue to call it a witch hunt, especially now that there's hard evidence released by his own son that the campaign knew that Russia sought to interfere in the election?
I think the president's made extremely clear his position on that, and it certainly has not changed.
Can you reiterate for me why he calls it a witch hunt?
Because the president knows very specifically any action or inaction that he's taken, and so I think that's pretty clear.
Does that include members of his campaign?
Look, I think we've been extremely clear, and I know Don Jr. was, and discussed it at length last night, as did the president's personal counsel over the last couple of days, and have walked through that very detailed. I think if there's been any evidence of collusion in 2016 that's come out at all or been discussed that's actually happened, it would be between the DNC and the Ukrainian government. I don't often quote the New York Times, but even one of their reporters tweeted earlier today that why this example provides evidence of collusion, quote, cooperation was between DNC officials and officials from the Ukrainian government, not just some associate. Ukrainian actions to coordinate with the DNC was actually successful, unlike anything shown by Don Jr.'s emails. Information passed to the DNC from the Ukrainian government directly targeted members of the Trump campaign in an attempt to undermine it. And that was just Ukraine. The other big news was the foreign intelligence dossier that the president's political opponents funded and disseminated widely and was based on discredited opposition research from foreign intelligence sources. The only collusion I've seen, and that's certainly been proven, would be between those people. Major.
So, does the president support the 3 changes that Senate Republicans have made in the health care bill to retain all of the tax increases on upper income investment earners and healthcare CEOs, and if so, why?
I haven't talked to him about the specific breakdown of those 3 things. I think the president, from day one, has been very clear about his priorities when it comes to the healthcare legislation. That's what he's focused on, and beyond that, I haven't gotten into the details with either he or Mark
Those tax increases, which Republicans have criticized since their enactment, fulfill the president's pledge to repeal the Affordable Care Act when they are foundational tax increases of that very law?
I'm not sure on that specific piece, but I do know, again, the president is committed to fully repealing and replacing Obamacare.
Can you do that and keep those tax increases?
I'd have to look at the specific piece you're talking about, and I haven't done that, Major.
So let me just ask you one question on this issue of those within the administration who have had to subsequently admit or concede contacts with Russians. Mike Flynn, Jared Kushner, the Attorney General, and now Don Jr. Can you explain to us why there is this plague of amnesia that affects all these people associated with the campaign and one country only?
Look, I think if you want to talk about having relationships with Russia, I'd look no further than the Clintons. Bill Clinton was paid $500,000 to give a speech to a Russian bank personally thanked by President Putin. Hillary Clinton allowed 1/5 of America's uranium reserve to be sold to a Russian firm whose investors were Clinton Foundation donors. The Clinton campaign chairman's brother lobbied against sanctions on Russia's largest bank and failed to report it. I think if we're looking at Russia relations with anybody, it would be directly with the Clintons.
My question was specifically about the need and the requirement to re-remember things that were not disclosed or forgotten. And I'm just trying to get your explanation as to why so many people can't remember contacts with one nation and the inquiries lead them to then remember and then subsequently disclose them. What does it account for this plague of amnesia?
Every single day we do our very best to give you the most accurate information that we have, and we continue to do that every single day and have offered to be as transparent as possible with all committees and anyone looking into this matter.
This doesn't suggest to you a pattern of not trying to be transparent.
Not at all. Again, like I said, our goal is to be as transparent as humanly possible and to put every bit of information that we have at the forefront and willing to cooperate with anybody that is looking into the matter.
When it's not at the forefront, when it has to be conceived, and then security clearance forms, in the case of Jared Kushner, have to be amended, and there's a re-remembering forced on them either by investigators or by journalists. How is that being at the forefront of transparency?
Again, every time a question's asked, we give you the best information that we have and try to give you as full and accurate information as possible at all times.
And have you done that in this case?
Absolutely.
So just, I guess, so we're all on the same page, and now you've had time to look into all these various meetings and people can remember things. Are there any other additional meetings members of the campaigns have had, advisors to the campaign have had during the campaign, between any Russian nationals and members of the campaign or advisors to the campaign? Is there anything else that's come to light that we should know about?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
Dave?
Oh, can I just have one more follow-up?
Sure.
You've been doing a lot of briefings lately. Will you continue doing the briefings, or can we expect Sean to be doing any briefings in the future?
I think we're all just trying to do the very best job we can every day, and sometimes it may be me, sometimes it may be Sean. Dave?
On the meeting with the Faith Advisory Board, someone tweeted out a picture of the meeting the other day, and the picture showed people, faith leaders, laying their hands on the president as they were praying. And I think there was an inference or implication from that photo coverage that they were praying for him because of a political crisis. Could you explain a little bit more about how the meeting came about and what it meant to the president to have them there?
The idea that somebody would only pray when they're in crisis, I think, makes you miss the entire point of what prayer is about. You should do that every day, and that's I think you can do that in the best of times and the worst of times. So I think it would be ridiculous to suggest the only time you might do that is in a time of crisis.
How did the meeting come about, and what did it mean?
It's a Faith Advisory Board, and they meet from time to time to speak about issues that are important to that community. John?
Thanks a lot, Sarah. Chris Wray was asked today in his confirmation hearing whether he believes Russia is a friend or a foe. And he said in his answer that he believes that Russia is a country that should be viewed, in his words, warily. I asked you this question on Monday, and I did not get an answer from you. I believe the same question was asked of you yesterday. You said you'd get back to us. And I think it's just a pretty basic question as to whether or not the president views Russia as a friend, partner, an ally, or an adversary. Do you have an answer yet on that question?
I don't, but John, I do assure you I will certainly work to make sure I get that answer to you.
And another question as it relates to the Russia sanctions bill. You had Mark Short out here the other day talking about the need for a waiver on that bill. That's what the administration would like to see. If there is no waiver attached to the bill and it comes before the president's desk, would the president veto this legislation?
Right now, we haven't made a determination because we don't think that this is an all or nothing process, nor should it be. In the current form, the legislation poses a number of risks to U.S. government's ability to conduct foreign policy. Until they get further in the process, we're not going to weigh in any further. Jeff?
Sarah, following up on the Chris Wray testimony today, he also said that he would not pledge loyalty to President Trump. Is that something that the president expects of him?
I think the president expects anybody that works anywhere in government to pledge loyalty to the country. And I think that would be the only pledge of loyalty that anyone would be asked.
And one follow-up on just the general Russia question. Can you describe the president's mood? Is he frustrated by these stories? Frustrated by Donald Jr.? How's he feeling?
You know, the president wants to be focused on his agenda. And he'd much rather be talking about health care, tax reform, infrastructure, national security. I think that that's his focus, and when he's talking about those things, that's a good day for all Americans. Peter.
Sarah, I want to ask you, the drip, drip, drip is undermining the credibility of this administration.
I think it's actually undermining the credibility of the media, because they drip, drip, drip a lot of things that don't seem to have much to do about nothing.
That's not the media saying that. This is Trey Gowdy, the Republican from South Carolina, saying this drip, drip, drip is undermining the credibility of this administration. So what do you say to Congressman Gowdy?
I think I just answered that.
So let me ask you, if I can, separately. You said, being asked about the witch hunt a little bit earlier, you said the president feels comfortable saying, as he's made clear, that it's a witch hunt because, in your words, he knows any action or inaction that has taken. But given the fact that Jay Sekulow and you have conceded that the president, or the outside counsel has conceded that the president was not aware of Donald Trump Jr., his own son's meeting with someone who was there under the guise of representing information from the Russian government, how can you say with certitude that the president does know any action that has taken place?
I think Jay Sekulow discussed this at length and covered that nothing inappropriate had taken place.
Would you concede the president does not know? There may be actions that took place that the president does not know about.
Once again, I think the president's been very clear about his opinion on the matter. Jonathan.
So, sir, just two things. One, on the issue of transparency. We now have 3 straight weekdays where there hasn't been a single public event on the president's schedule. That's unusual for any president, especially this one, who, through the first months of his presidency was constantly, bringing the pool in. We saw him doing a number of events a day. Why the sudden secrecy and hiding from the public that we're seeing now? Why has the president not been visible to the public for the better part of a week?
There's nothing secret about having meetings, which I read off to you earlier, with members of his staff and members of the administration. The president had an incredibly robust schedule overseas in both Poland and Germany, and he's preparing to leave this afternoon, where he'll be spending quite a bit of time with a lot of those of you who are traveling, and we'll be taking questions from you guys tomorrow.
And then on the Don Jr. emails, you've heard from a number of Democrats who have raised serious questions about the fact that Jared Kushner was also part of that meeting. He was part of that email chain, knew what that meeting was about, knew what was promised. What do you say to Democrats who say that Jared Kushner's security clearance should be revoked?
Once again, we don't discuss security clearances, but I think Democrats are trying to play political games, and I think it's ridiculous.
Is there any concern over the top advisor of the president?
Did nothing wrong? No. Tomorrow.
Thank you, Sarah. You just said he'd much rather be talking about tax reform and health care and infrastructure. What has stopped him this week from talking about any of those things?
Like I said, he's been talking about those internally. Look, he does that through a number of ways. We've been up here every day that I've been up here this week. I've included a pretty heavy portion of the opening statement has to do with health care and a number of other issues that are part of the president's agenda. We've put out multiple statements on several issues, and members of his cabinet have been very active in public capacity this week. And just because it's not the president directly standing behind a podium making a speech doesn't mean he's not communicating to the American people or pushing his agenda forward.
Right, but Jeff asked you how he was feeling. He said he was frustrated because he'd much rather be talking about these things. Now you're saying he has been talking about these things.
He asked me specifically about that issue and whether or not he was frustrated by that issue. John Gizzi.
Thank you, Sarah. 2 questions. First, thank you very much.
Just 2, not 3 today?
Not 3. First, thank you very much for getting back to me on the blue slip question. My other question, you may recall, was would the administration itself take into account the recommendations of the American Bar Association on judicial appointments or not? And
I didn't get a chance to check on that part of the question, so I'll have to circle back.
My other question is, The President today had an interview with Reverend Robertson, and I wondered if this would lead to the opening of further interviews with some of us, one-on-one with the President, or very possibly a news conference in the near future.
He's holding a press conference tomorrow while he's in Paris, and I'll certainly put in the request for an interview with you, John. Mike.
Two healthcare questions. It looks like we may get some new version of the Senate bill tomorrow, perhaps, and some action maybe next week. As this heads towards what may be some kind of conclusion, if it happens, how much credit does the White House think that it should take and that President Trump should get or receive for how that bill is shaped in the end?
Right now, I think the White House is not focused on who gets the credit, but making sure that American people get the care. That's our focus, and that hasn't changed.
I mean, is the White House actually actively participating then? Is the President participating in helping to shape some of the stuff that
Once again, we've said this all along, that the White House and members of the administration have provided technical assistance throughout the process, and we're going to continue to do that.
On that, President Trump is known for loving to put his name on the top of his buildings and everything else that he can get his name on. President Obama didn't name Obamacare.
I'm sure he wishes he hadn't now.
You'd have to ask him, I suppose. Does President Trump hope that whatever emerges from this process will ultimately be known as Trumpcare?
Once again, I've said it many times before, we're not focused on the label, but focused on making sure we have a healthcare system in place that actually works, doesn't bankrupt the system, and help protect Americans across the board.
Sarah?
Kevin.
Thank you. When the President has his conversations with President Macron, is it your expectation that he will ask him, or at least engage him, on this concept of climate change and the Paris Accord, or maybe what might come out of our lack of participation in that accord? And I guess my follow-up would be about Janet Yellen. We've asked you before if the President has confidence in her. If she were not in that position, would Gary Cohn be someone the President would like to see in a position like that?
On the first question, we never get ahead of the President's conversations. We'll certainly provide a readout, and you guys will also have the chance to ask the President himself and hear a joint statement from both presidents after their meeting. In terms of Janet Yellen and Gary Cohn, I think Gary has been pretty clear that he loves his job and he's happy doing what he's doing, and I don't have anything further to add on that.
Did the President watch, by the way, Mr. Ray today by chance? I know he said in his suite, I don't even have time to watch TV. Do you think he had a chance to pick up some of that?
I don't know if he saw much of it, if any. I know that he was doing quite a few meetings earlier this morning, so as far as I'm aware, I don't know if he saw any of it.
I just want to give you a chance to respond. Democratic Congressman Brad Sherman of California today entered an official bill, an article of impeachment. Any response?
I think that is utterly and completely ridiculous and a political game at its worst. Thanks so much, guys.
All right, folks, thank you very much for joining us and choosing us as your stream of choice. That was a pretty quick press briefing, but as they said, President Trump is set to leave tonight or today to Paris. He's going to have a press conference tomorrow, so we'll be streaming that live here at Golden State Times. So thank you very much for watching. If you're new, subscribe to the channel. Also, don't forget to smack that like button on your way out. And if you missed any part of the press briefing, it should be uploaded soon on our channel, so go and check it out. We're going to be uploading a whole bunch of news videos today, and also check out our Facebook. We are starting to write stories too. We're going to be covering news stories that we can't cover here on YouTube because of censorship and demonetization. So make sure to go on our Facebook and read the stories that we're going to be covering on there regarding ISIS and terrorist attacks and stuff like that. So go and check us out on Facebook, and also like us on, or follow us on Facebook and also on Twitter. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. My name is Jen. I'm from Golden State Times, and I'll see you soon. Peace. It's like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter. There we go.